So hello, today I'm at St Peter's Church in Paglesham in Essex, and I'd like to talk to you about the history of the church and the village. So Paglesham is in Essex, small village. It's 7.5 miles from Southend-on-Sea and about 4 miles from Canewdon. The village is surrounded by flat farmland and marshland, and the land tapers down to the River Crouch, the Roach and the Paglesham Creek. So it's on a peninsula. The elevation is about 3 metres, so it's quite low, and the population is around 254. Paglesham is in quite an isolated part of Essex, and the address of St Peter's Church is number 1 World's End, Church End, and I found this most unusual and idyllic. Now the history, I must say, is varied. The Neolithic period of around 6500 BC, Paglesham sat on the eastern edge of a peninsula of gravel, and this protruded into the coastal marsh, but it was just above the high tide mark, so it's possible people were living on there from time to time. In 1964 a stone axe head was found from this period at South Hall, which is not far from where we are now. And during the Roman period, salt production took place here, with the evidence of red hills still visible today. Now red hills were where the seawater was boiled, creating salt flakes. They were highly prized during the Roman Empire. Now during the Saxon period, Ingolf the Thane lived here, and his manor was called Paglesham, and today it's known as Church Hall Manor, which is not far from here. Now Ingolf had a small manor consisting of only 11 smallholders and 1 plough team and 120 sheep. Now Ingolf may well have been connected to Crowland in Lincolnshire, where in 1087 he became the abbot there, but more interestingly he was connected to William the Conqueror in 1051. Now we come on to what I would call one of the most interesting periods, the Vikings. And nobody knows really where Canute the Great and the thousands of Vikings would have landed in 1016, but Paglesham is literally only 4 miles away from Canute's battle camp in Canewdon. I'm pretty sure after the battle the Danes would have utilised the resources here, for Paglesham is a fantastic resource. Oysters. Now Daniel Defoe, he carried out a tour of the whole of the island of Great Britain between 1724 and 1726. And he wrote, "On this shore also taken the best and the nicest, though not the largest oysters in England." Now in the time of the Normans there were 4 manors here, and the nearest to here would have been Church Hall, and even today it's there is a moat behind me. I'm not sure if that's connected. Now Ingolf, he gave the estate to St Peter's of Westminster in 1066, and this was confirmed by Edward the Confessor, and this hall was held, well, this manor was held by Westminster until King Henry VIII broke up the monasteries. We also had an East Hall and a South Hall, and they were held by Ralph de Coggeshall from the 1200s, and by 1438 they belonged to the Paglesham family, and they would be passed from family to family right the way down to Richard Lord Rich of 1566, and I love that name. I think it's worth mentioning the men for centuries who maintained the seawalls here, for in 1531 Henry VIII he established the appointment of commissioners of sewers covering over 300 miles of seawalls. Can you imagine that? Now before this, each landlord and tenant was responsible for their own stretch of seawall, and there are a lot of seawalls here today. For a well-maintained sea wall allowed for sheep to graze well into the summer on these lands, and they would produce large cheeses for the labourers and the peasants of the day. We also have the lonely wallers, who would maintain the dykes in the estuaries here. The valuable oyster layings were carefully tended and jealously guarded, We also have wild fowling, which was a flourishing enterprise with decoys for decoy ponds for ducks. And if we have a little look, you can see some of the drainage ditches are still here, straight in front of us. But everything seems to have changed around the year 1800. The entire population of Paglesham seems to have been involved in the free trade, which is smuggling. Now in 1 year, over 13,000 gallons of Geneva and brandy, plus silk, fabric, tea and anything else they could get their hands on, was hidden in 3 hollow elm trees near East Hall. Now the elm trees have long gone, but there is a pond and a small red post box, which is the location, and it's a really good location because it's on a junction, so you can imagine that they would have dropped the stuff off inside the hollow trees. Possibly I would guess they would have hollowed out the tree a bit more and put a false door on it and then disguised it with some brambles perhaps, and then at night possibly somebody would have passed with a wagon and taken the goods, I guess. It must have seemed in these days to the authorities that every loose brick could hide something. Now Paglesham had many smugglers. I think I read that 50% of the men here were involved. But Hardapple Blyth was the legend of them all, and he was a churchwarden right here and a grocer in his later years. And he would even do this, believe this, he would wrap the butter and bacon in pages from the parish register. And I believe that several parish registers from that time are still missing. In their spare time, Blyth and his accomplices would play cricket near the Punch Bowl Inn, placing their cutlasses and loaded pistols on the jackets. If we look in the distance, you look at that building to the left of the lamppost, the tall one, it's 3 stories high. That is the Punch Bowl, and to the left of that, through that tree line, that's probably where the field was, where they played cricket. Now Blyth's boat was captured during a run and the cargo was transferred to the revenue cutter. Oh, it's so windy. Now once on board, Blyth started drinking with the revenue crew, taking full advantage of his legendary head for alcohol. The men were totally drunk, and Blyth then restored his cargo to its rightful home. And not only that, but he took some as well. So he seems to be a very shrewd individual indeed. I also like to mention Charles Darwin's ship, which he would board and live on for 18 months at sea. And he also spent 3 years on land in exotic places mapping the evolution of life. The ship was called HMS Beagle. Excuse me. Oh dear. It was used to map the Galapagos Islands and chart Australia, the coastline, and South America also. And she would end the days right here, literally walking distance. And I've literally just walked it. From where I am now, it's about a 15-minute walk, maybe a bit more. And although the ship is no longer there, I believe in the future the council are going to put a plaque. Now in her final day she spent her time here looking for smugglers. I think she was here over 20 years. She would be working around the Thames and the Roach and the Crouch estuaries. She was eventually broken up right here, and parts of this wonderful ship have ended up building houses and barns here, and perhaps the dock itself. I believe the anchor is also been salvaged. And by the 1890s, Paglesham had 30 oyster boats, or smacks as they were known, and the crews would meet up in the Plough Sail for a hard-earned drink. Now the Plough Sail is still there. Now the pub gets its name from the two industries Paglesham folk have worked in, obviously the fields, or the land and the sea. But during the 1920s, day trippers from London would sample oysters here, and today this fine old pub is still the centre of life here. Now we're actually in the area of Paglesham called Church End, and the Punch Bowl, which you can see in front of us, is now a private residence. By the 1800s it was an inn. It'd become the local of William Blyth and his crew. Before that it was a sailmaker's, and if you look at the building it's like 3 stories high. It's an amazing structure. It's got a warehouse look about it. But it was closed in 2018. I find Paglesham a fascinating place, to be honest. Church End and East End are separated by fields. It's definitely a good place for walking, cycling, bird watching, and just letting one's imagination go. Now I'm going to show you the layout of the land. You've got to bear with me because it's so windy. I hope you can hear me. Where that house is, the road goes off to the east end, and the road then goes to a fork or junction, which will then go off to Rayleigh, Rochford Way, I guess, and then the road then comes round here. So this is what they call Church End. Now we're going to look at the church itself. Right, I'm going to start with these steps. So these amazing steps are basically used for, in the 18th, 19th centuries, for people with horses. It's called a mountain block. And you basically just climb up. So, and the horse would be brought round by somebody, a groom perhaps. You could put your leg over there. The only ones I've come across before are in Bradwell-on-Sea. They're quite rare. So St Peter's Church, the walls are made of Reigate stone and pudding stone with flint rubble, and we've got Roman brick. Now the nave and the chancel contain 12th century masonry. We should start with the west tower. Let's go this way here. So the west tower itself is 11 feet by 10 feet and it's 16th century. It's 3 stages with an embattled parapet. Which you can see on the top. Now it had a major restoration in 1880, and in 2009 Friends of St Peter formed to raise money for the renovation of the West Tower, so it's obviously fell into a bit of a state then. Now in 2010 work was meant to go ahead and they had to postpone it due to bats. The bats are a protected species in England, so they had to wait for the maternity season to end, and then soon after the fine old tower was renovated. Now in front of us we've got the south porch, and this is a Victorian porch that's fairly recent. It's likely that there would have been a porch before. Now if there was a porch before, it would have held, before the Reformation, it would have held baptisms and weddings would have taken place, and also public penances. And it would have been a social hub. So it's standing up well. I'm going to take my hat off. So what you're faced with in here is the Victorian beams, and then in front of us we've got a very old door and stone jambs and arch. Now this door is actually 15th century. It's nail studded. It's oak. You can just see the moulded battens, and you can just see where it's been spliced in with some renovated battens. And the door's just open for us by magic. And you've got the original iron straps here to run across. Now a member of the Bat Preservation Society told the church that most bats enter churches through the front door, so they've always got a bit of a gap. So we should go in. And if you look down here, looks like a Baker Light door handle perhaps. And I really love this sliding bolt. Look at that, all floppy and worn out. We should go in. I hope you can hear me now. It's absolutely blowing a gale today. Beautiful weather, but so windy. So there's the view, and if we look down, some amazing worn sort of flagstones. I think that might be a headstone there. Yeah, that one's a headstone. Very old. And if we come back, you can see the old patina of that door. So we'll close this. And look at the coloration of that door, isn't that great? Now Hollywood would love to replicate that. Wow. And what I'd like to show you is this chest down here. I'm just going to turn. Don't know if you can see that. Yeah, so this old chest, it's believed to have been made around 16th century, but the boards are from the 13th century. Can you believe that? 13th century, and I'll show you that in a minute. If you look here, you've got three, is it urchulons? The locks, the middle one's been removed, and there's the third one there. You can see the old boards. Now if we go round to the other side, you can see the original carved, painted decoration at the base. So at the top you've got, obviously got the old iron hinges, and at the base quite incredible, isn't it? To think they're so old. And I think it's like a dovetail joinery on it. Now this old work is called poker work. Now if we look up here, I always find photographs so interesting. There's a list of, or a group of rectors from past, obviously no longer with us, and they go into detail on this board about the history of the rectors that were here, 1316, and then the dissolution of the monasteries, etc. It's fascinating. Now if we look here, we've got a font, quite a small font. This is 19th century. It's presented by Reverend Belly, who was the presenter of St Paul's Cathedral in London. Now the top font cover is in memory of Kenneth Keble in World War II. He was lost at sea, sadly, in 1941, and the Kebles worked in the oyster business here. Now here we have a selection of books. Now I believe these are local people that have written this, Paglesham natives. It goes into great detail. I've not read it myself, but I had a little flick through. It does look good. So up here we have a painting of Zachary Petit. Look at that. Oh, it looks like it's in oil. Great moustache and beard. Zachary owned Cupola House, and the grand old house is on the way to the Plough Sail pub at East End. If you look on the top, there is a lookout post, or like a glass house. Zachary was church warden here, and he was an oyster merchant. He was also a major benefactor of St Peter's renovations in 1883. He donated the parish reading rooms, which I believe are the green metal building, corrugated building that's in that area. Now if you look up there, if you can see that, I'm going to do my best to zoom up. Now then, this is the west window in memory of 4 children who passed away from here, sadly. So shame is hidden. Now, if you look here, we have the Tower Arch. This is 15th century, and originally it would have a music gallery, and it would have had a choir and musicians. This was removed in 1883. Now these west doors, these are something else. Looks like they're all made of oak. Now these come from, these are actually from Westminster Cathedral in London. They were brought here in 1969. They're in memory of Reverend Jennings, something else. Right, so actually, yeah, I'm just going to just missed out one important thing, which is not good. We're actually standing in the nave. So the nave is 37 feet by 22 feet, and it was built in the 15th century. Now the south wall there is original 12th century. So if we can pick that up there. Right, I'll go back over to the old organ. Beautiful. Looks like pine actually. Pine organ, I think. So this was made by Alfred Monk of London from Holloway Road. The family made organs for 23 years, and on the railway I actually worked at Holloway. It's quite interesting. Busy part of the world. And you've got the original candle holders there. Now, when I did look up the Monk family, I did find a William Monk of London of the same period, and he was an organist, and he wrote church hymns, amazing ones, such as Evertide, Abide by Me, and All Things Bright and Beautiful. I wonder if they were related, perhaps. Now then, up here, we have an interesting board. This is from John Massue, who gave money every year to 6 poor families during the Napoleonic Wars. Massue was a silk merchant in London. He purchased Southall Farm, and in his will and testament he left money to 6 poor men and their widows unless they remarried. What a amazing. You can see how thick the walls are there just by looking at that. Now, if we look at this arch, which is in front of us, let's make sure I've got the right one. This was rebuilt in the 15th century. Its early stonework replaced, let's have a look. It replaced the Norman arch. Originally there would have been a rood screen that spanned across here, and it would have been painted and carved with figures of Christ, and I guess it would have come off the plinth here and here. Now these were spons, these sort of columns here, of 13th century, so they're really old. Now if you look on the floor, I found this really quite unusual. The headstones that I'm standing over are butting up to each other, and the same on the other side. Now the reason is that they were brought in from the cemetery to preserve them. These are 17th and 18th century, and if you look you can see fine work, cherubs, etc. carved in there. And if we look at the dates, this is around the time of Dick Turpin, the highwayman, or Richard Turpin I think it's called, and they carry on all the way through. Now I'm facing the actual chancel itself. This is 18 feet by 17 feet. Oh, just one other thing before I go, so I don't miss that. Above us you've got the royal coat of arms. Now we're going to make our way over to this slab here. So this is John Massue, and if you look up here we have the funeral hatchment of Massue. These are the arms of Massue. Now funeral hatchments were used to be placed outside the home of the deceased, and later they would be brought into churches. So you see them quite often in churches. Quite common. And again we have some really nicely carved memorials and more very thick windows, or the walls themselves. And we've also got the altar rails here in iron, and then on the other side you can see some really nice tiles full of character. Now if you look over there, just the other side of the altar itself, we have a small relic, which is, let me focus in on that, this is 1150 when I researched it online, so you've got a drain there, so the column is more modern, you can see some sort of pattern there. It's got capital and central drain. It's the oldest antiquity in the church. Now 1150 was the year of Henry, son of Empress Matilda, who becomes Duke of Normandy. Henry would soon become King Henry II. And now the sun is cooperating with us. You've got a lovely window in memory of Zachary Petit. And his wife there, but you can see the lovely colours. St Anne. Got a beautiful window here, which I really don't want to miss. Now, this is 1883. It's memorial of George Browning. St Peter walks on water, and you can see the detail there. Really quite fine. If we look over here, hidden behind the pulpit, pine pulpit, it's not so old I don't think, we have piscina, and you can see it's all flaking off, and down the bottom there you can see it's all broken away. Now originally these piscinas were used for washing vessels, I think, and the idea was that the water was so holy that it would be, the idea was to drain it through the fabric of the wall itself. So here we have a small alcove, and they're not really sure of the reason for this. It could be from a period when they would keep something such as a bone of a saint perhaps in there. Now, these lovely old pews, which are all pine. These are from 1883, so not so old. But in 1883 we had Krakatoa exploded. We have the first electric lights in America from Thomas Edison. And we have oxygen is liquefied, and the world's first rodeo in Texas, USA. Now we shall make our way outside. This is one of these lovely old churches that's left open, so you're welcome to visit. And there's also, I forgot to show you that, but if you look inside, there's an array of books, so you can buy these books. I did meet a couple the other day, and they would come from Southend, it's not so far from here, and they come here just to buy the books. So if you're into books, now then, if we go outside, a very interesting window here. And what makes this window interesting is the stone jambs either side, In the Victorian period it was heavily researched. You've got the sort of carvings there, but it's these small carvings around that go around the circumference. Some of these were dated to Henry VII, and I've got a feeling it's this one here. It's the Tudor Rose from Henry VII. This one here, they weren't really sure of its significance. They think it's some ancient heraldry families from here. Now up here, try not to get stung by these stinging nettles. You can see that there's some work been done on the stonework, and they've got an ancient king's head there. But on the other side, most strange, there's a block. It's almost like the mason finished it. For some reason. And again you can see some Victorian period heads carved in there. Now if we're talking bells, we've got 3 bells. We've got a John Deere of 1598 and we've got a Charles Newman 1693. Now Charles was a bell founder from Colchester. His partner was Henry Pleasant in Sudbury, and they would move the bells by barge. Everything arrived by river at Pleasant's foundry. We've also got a, let's have a look. Yeah, the last bell is a John Wylot, and he was 1706, and John cast 70 bells from the Kent foundry. Canewdon, it's only 4 miles away, has a Wylot bell. Now we're on to the south side of the chancel, and if you look at the top there you can see where some work's been done on the stone drip work there. You can see how they've cut that in. Amazes me how they can always splice in a new piece of limestone. And if you look here, this sea air that dominates this area, you can see how it destroys the limestone. You can see how the Victorians have replaced various blocks. There's an original one down there. There's no sundials on this side, or scratch dials. I suspect it might have been on this one, and it's been long removed, worn. And we walk around. It's the other side of that lovely window from inside. Now I'm going to show you the graves of William Blyth and his family, which are basically these 4 here. Now I've got a feeling that the first one here, I've got a feeling this is William Blyth's, and this will be his wife Elizabeth, and I've got a feeling these are his 2 sons. Now I think if I've got this right, William in his later years, he was never convicted of any crime, although he was caught a few times. He seemed to have got away with it. I believe he was caught on a ship, and it ran aground, and he made a deal to if he helped them, they'd let him off. So he kind of always slipped out the net. You can just about see that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is Captain Joseph Blyth. Not sure. Needs to do some research. Oh, hold on. Is that him? William Blyth. Yeah, I need to do some research. But I do know that he died in 1830 and he was 76. And I think in his later years he became a grocer here. So that's when he was probably wrapping the sausages and bacon in the parish registers. So it's quite a character. I should make my way around here. Again, Victorian period stonework, quite impressive, and some really heavy window bars. And this looks like the vestry which we're looking at now. So today, St Peter's is a church that carries out baptisms, weddings and funerals and various social events. You see the size of the tower. And if we go over, yeah, I'm sorry to keep going on about William Blyth, but he sounds like an interesting character. But the tower there, it's allegedly that he would hide some merchandise in that tower, because you can see the windows there. But anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much.